Hurt my family? Guess you'll die. My grandfather grew up in a rural Peruvian town where only his family lived, very isolated from others. They lived about half an hour away from the nearest town. This story happened sometime in the 1940s. As one would assume, everyone was close. This story is about one of my grandfather's many cousins, let's call her Mary 20, and her husband, Peter 25. Mary's dad went away to work in the capital for a while, taking Mary with him. There, she met Peter, fell in love, and married. They returned to town a couple of months after they wed. They rented the room at the local saloon, I think that's the word anyway, while Peter worked with Mary's dad selling goods in neighboring towns to save money. Turns out, Peter was in a shoal. Not only did he cheat on Mary while he was away working, but he also severely beat her when he was home, even more than the standard at the time. Eventually, the owner of the saloon, a distant cousin of Mary, noticed, hereby called owner 50. He confronted her, and after a lot of prodding, she admitted to everything. She hadn't confessed before as her close family, especially her dad, opposed the marriage, and she was ashamed to admit Peter was an abuser. Well, she wouldn't have to suffer much longer, as owner would take matters into his own hands. He liked to play a prank on newcomers. He would take them to a field a half hour away to hunt what he claimed was the most delicious bird he had ever tasted. Spoiler alert, that bird did not exist. It had a funny name I can't remember, so I'll just call it Birdie. He would leave them in the middle of the field with a net while he went away to chase the birdies into the net. He would then walk back to town while the newcomer was kept waiting for the birdies. Eventually, newcomer would return to town and be mocked and laughed at for buying the story. Just some good old, rural town fun. He had yet to prank Peter as he was mostly away working. However, not long after an opportunity presented itself. He was able to lead Peter away with the same story as always, but he didn't play the prank on him. Instead, he led him to a field 1.52 hours away instead, getting him drunk on the way, and then pushed him into a nearby lake where he drowned. He then returned to town and claimed Peter had wanted to actually hunt the birds, not just wait, and it was hard to convince him otherwise as a way to excuse his tardiness. Peter's disappearance was noticed the next day by Mary's dad when he didn't show up to his house or work and when he wasn't in the rented room. Owner gave his excuse, the others at the saloon and his wife corroborated his story. A few days later, Peter was found drowned in the lake. It was concluded that while waiting for the birdies, he'd gotten drunk, and when he attempted to return to town, he had gotten lost and fallen into the lake. Unlike her husband, Mary's life ended on a happy note. She remarried to a much nicer man, had 8 children, and bought a house in the capital where she lived until she died of cancer circa 2003. The amazing owner also had a happy life and died in the late 1970s. My grandfather only knew this story because he overheard owner tell Mary's dad the true story. Apart from him, no one else but the three of them knew. He told me one day I was asking about secrets about his small town. Yes, I like gossip. Story 2, cheat on my friend, I'll kick you out of high school. This story happened back when I was in high school about 5 years ago, so I think it's safe to talk about now. One of my good friends and teammate, we'll call him Stan, had a girlfriend, we'll call her Liz, back during our junior year of high school. No one on our team really liked Liz. She was pretty self-centered and was always that obnoxious girl in class who always wanted to be the center of attention. She also was one of the more attractive girls in our class, and she knew it. Liz was the kind of girl who would do anything to be popular, and in this case, that meant getting in a relationship with our top wrestler football player. Stan, however, is a great guy. He was team captain, scholar athlete, took advanced courses in school, and I'm not even kidding when I say he was friends with everyone in that school. So coming into junior year, when most athletes go from the JV squad to varsity, it was no surprise that Liz started flirting with Stan more and hanging out around him in the halls during lunch and before school. Soon Stan and Liz got together and made it Facebook official. Of course, people were happy for them, but my teammates and I could tell, soon after they got together, that she was not a good match for Stan. She was very manipulative. She always invited herself to our team get-togethers, which mostly was 10-15 guys in a house watching Monday Night Football or playing videos games and going over our playbook. Anytime Stan would go out anywhere, Liz would try and force her way in somehow. And if Stan went out without her, she would constantly text him and make him feel bad for not inviting her, thus ruining his time, since he would spend most of his time on the phone with her, calming her down from her tantrums. However, after about 3 months of being together, one of our teammates found she made a profile on a dating app. We told Stan about it and he confronted Liz. Somehow she made a good enough excuse that Stan bought it and they stayed together, but not for long. About 3 weeks after the incident, Stan caught her cheating on him with another guy from a different school. He saw them at a restaurant holding hands over the table. He was picking up dinner for his family. After he dropped the food off at home, he went to Liz's place to find her sitting on top of this guy, making out, and with the guy's hands on her chest. Her house had one of those small angled windows next to the front door where, when the blinds are up, you can see into the living room from behind the couch. He took a photo and left, holding back tears and feeling broken. They broke up that night, and since that was Stan's first real girlfriend, it really took a toll on him. His grades started slipping. At this point, he was in wrestling season, and he lost a lot of weight from stress and not eating. All his friends tried to cheer him up, but what made it worse was the fact that not even a week later, Liz was with some new guy, not even the same guy from the photo. She also rubbed salt on his wounds by openly talking to our classmates, saying how great the new guy was in bed. Liz was Stan's first. My teammates and I were pissed. We were watching as our friend was getting more and more depressed each day, and how Liz kept screwing with Stan emotionally. This continued for about 5-6 weeks. That's when we had enough. It was time to kick her out of our school. Now the state we lived in had just passed a law allowing the use of recreational marijuana for people over the age of 21, but shops weren't open yet. So I contacted my older brother, who had just graduated from college from a town notorious in the state for its pot culture. I told him the story and gave him some money to get some W-Ed. Our plan was to stash the W-Ed in her locker, then have one of our female friends anonymously leave a tip to the office saying Liz was smoking in the bathroom stalls. No one ever really used their locker in school, but since Stan and Liz were together, they did the clique couples thing where they shared a locker since her locker was in the middle of the school. What I didn't expect was my friend wanting to pitch in, and also leave in her locker a couple of his doctor-prescribed Adderall pills. We were young and didn't know the serious charges that could come from that. We just knew it wasn't legal for her to have those if she wasn't prescribed them. So we took the W-Ed and pills, and one day after the last class let out, when she was by her locker putting her textbooks away, we distracted her and I tucked the goodie bag behind one of her bottom textbooks and shifted the top book against the back of the locker so you couldn't see it unless you pulled out the top textbook and looked in the bottom back corner of the locker. We did this during the day because our school had cameras in the hallways, and we thought it would look suspicious if someone who wasn't Liz opened up the locker. Our friend later after school called the office making the tip. Now, since the school knew that pot had just become legal, they had a zero-tolerance policy with drugs and alcohol. The following Monday before school started, we watched as the student resource officer came in with a K9 and proceeded to sniff out all the lockers in the school. They marked each locker that the K9 sat in front of, and locked them so you couldn't open them, even if you took the padlock off. I think there was a total of 6 or 7 lockers marked, but it didn't matter to us. The W-Ed that was in Liz's locker was so strong that you could smell it just by walking past it down the hall. Later we heard that during first period, the officer came into Liz's class and pulled her out. We're guessing she had to open the locker in front of him and let him search. Of course, he found the baggie, but what we later heard was that she even failed a drug test. She must have smoked prior to the incident. She was charged with a juvenile felony because of the pills and W-Ed and was expelled. She tried to blame Stan, saying that they shared a locker earlier in the year, but with his great track record in school, and the fact that he offered to take a drug test, which he of course passed, they didn't believe it for a second. Liz went on to rant about the situation on Facebook, blaming the school for an invasion of privacy. Liz had to spend the rest of her high school classes at one of the district's remedial high schools, the type with stricter teachers and metal detectors and pat-downs as you enter. The following senior year, Stan went on to have one of his best years. He graduated with honors, got accepted into his dream college, and won Male Athlete of the Year. Meanwhile, Liz still showed up to our high school's away football and basketball games so she could hang out with her friends. But during the summer, right after graduation, Liz came out on social media saying she was 5 months pregnant. She must have gotten knocked up right before graduation. Stan has now graduated with his degree and was able to travel this last summer with his girlfriend around parts of Asia. Meanwhile, Liz is dealing with the struggle of being a single parent, working full-time as a receptionist for a clinic, and still living at home with her parents. Edit: since most people believe the revenge was too severe, allow me to show you how I see it. We wanted to get her in trouble in order to make her leave the school, and it worked. But, it only worked because she failed the drug test. If she was clean, she would have been cited by the school, maybe suspended for possession, but not expelled because she failed the drug test. Not our fault she chose to smoke in her life. She had to attend a remedial high school, which she graduated from, and had just as many, if not more opportunities to attend college, explained in comments. When she turned 18 during that senior year, because it was a juvenile offense, it was dropped. She was no longer a minor, so it was completely off her record why she was able to pass a background check for her job in a clinic. What's preventing her from going to college? I believe that is, if she wants to attend a university, is the fact that she got knocked up and needs to support a child now. Again, this isn't my fault. She had unprotected time and had a kid because of it. All I'm at fault for is making her switch schools, and putting a juvenile record on her for maybe about 7 months, which again, was lifted when she turned 18.